Coming up on this Thursday edition of Newsline at noon, as search operations continue into the second Sewol-ho ferry, a body is found some 2 kilometers away from the accident site. The death toll now stands at 213, with 89 still unaccounted for. The U.S. Federal Reserve decides to taper another $10 billion, cutting its monthly asset purchases to $45 billion while keeping its rates unchanged. Plus, Japanese Prime Minister Shin Se-min says Tokyo cannot follow the steps Germany took in dealing with historical issues, pointing to the different situations in post-war Europe and modern-day Asia. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's noon Thursday, May 1st here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Ojin Ju.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. We start with the latest on the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. Strong currents and bad weather hampered search efforts overnight, but conditions have improved over the course of this Thursday morning. The confirmed death toll now stands at 213, with 89 people, mostly teenagers, still unaccounted for. Now, for the latest on the search operation and the ongoing investigation into the sinking, our Shin Se-min joins us from the news center. Se-min, fill us in with the details.
Yes, into now a 16th day since the ferry capsized, the families of the victims continue to wait for the news on their loved ones. And early this morning at around 4 a.m., another body was discovered, and it is presumed to be a student from Danwon High School. Now that pushed the death toll to 213, as you just mentioned. The more favorable weather conditions near the accident site aren't doing much good, as high tides and fast currents are hampering the search operations. Now rescuers are not only focusing on the 4th floor where most of the missing were initially thought to be, but also on the 5th floor lobby where many of the recently retrieved bodies were located. So far, of the ferry's 111 cabins, 44 have been checked by divers. And one female student victim who was recovered Wednesday was actually found by a fisherman who was out to prevent the ferry's oil spill from spreading to his fish farm. The victim was found approximately 2.4 kilometers away from the accident site, making families worry that some victims' bodies may have drifted out to sea. Now, the sense of urgency in finding victims has never wavered. And to speed efforts up, the Coast Guard has been trying to deploy a diving bell for days now. And they tried again on Wednesday, but were forced to scrap the plans after just 20 minutes when an air supply hose broke.
Well, let's hope that diving bell can be used today, because there have been a lot of problems with that since they tried to deploy it. In another development, the Korean Coast Guard has issued an apology to the victims' families. Tell us more about that.
That's right. Yes, there has been a press briefing in Chindo Wednesday where the Commissioner General of the Korea Coast Guard, Kim Seok-yoon, a member of the government task force handling the disaster, apologized for the pain the accident has caused to families. Now he bowed his head and assumed responsibility for the disorganized, inefficient, and slow rescue efforts. He also said he had pushed for a clear answers to the criminal investigations.
We truly apologize for victims of the family who are going through an unbearable sorrow and agony. We accept that initial operation efforts weren't fast and efficient enough. All members of the Korea Coast Guard will fully cooperate with the investigation.
Now that investigation includes allegations against the operator of the ferry Cheonghejin Marine Company of overloading the vessel. 2 staff members have been arrested for ignoring crew members' safety warnings on multiple occasions. Also, a shocking revelation was made regarding rescue operations in the early days following the ferry sinking. A lawmaker of the Parliamentary Defense Committee said that a report by the Defense Ministry showed that the Maritime Police restricted the Navy from getting close to the accident site and claimed Undine, a private rescue operation company, should die first, the company that was hired by Cheonghejin Marine.
Well, if that turns out to be true, it will reflect extremely badly on the authorities. Now, Se-min, how about the investigation into the actual owner of the Cheonghae Marine Company? What do we know now?
Yes, Chinjo, a special investigation team is speeding up its probe, especially on the practical owner of the ferry operator, Yu Byung-an. Yu's brother-in-law and 2 daughters have been notified to appear before prosecutors by Friday 10 a.m. Korea time. So that only leaves us with 24 hours, less than 24 hours to meet the deadline. And only one of 7 key figures linked to Yu is Song Gong-min, the CEO of the cosmetic company called Tapanda. Song was questioned for 14 hours Wednesday at the Incheon District Prosecutor's Office on suspicion of corruption. And he's the second person to be questioned as a suspect following Kim Han-sik, the president of the Cheonghae Marine Company, for any involvement in business irregularities such as embezzlement, dereliction of duty, and tax evasion in connection with Yu. Also, now the investigations have revealed that the Sewol-ho ferry had been put up for sale just 1 month before the accident. And if the company would have sold it at its asking price, the Cheonghae Marine Company would have taken a loss of roughly $5.8 million, and investigators are trying to figure out why. That's all I have for now, but I will bring you more updates later on.
Thank you, Se-min. Now, in the wake of the ferry disaster, the government will put more money into establishing an integrated disaster response system and boosting emergency training. At a financial strategy meeting Thursday, President Park Geun-hye asked all ministries to make sure manuals that contain emergency response procedures are in place and those in charge are well informed and properly trained. While recognizing the need to spend more on welfare, the president also talked about maintaining the country's financial soundness through a so-called pay-go policy, whereby expenditures are paid for with funds that are already available. Overall spending would be further reduced by merging some 600 projects that overlap or are similar in nature over the next 3 years.
The unbearable wait continues on Jindo Island for dozens of families. They refuse to leave the area until their loved ones who are still missing return to them.
Volunteer workers have been doing all they can, but now a group of people who have gone through a similar awful experience are on site to offer some words of comfort. Kwon So-ah reports.
A group who knows as well as anyone the pain of having lost a family member in a ship disaster arrived on Jindo Island Wednesday afternoon to help the people who continue to wait for word of their loved ones who were aboard the Sewol-ho ferry. The new group of volunteers is made up of family members of the victims who lost their lives when the South Korean warship Cheonan sunk on March 26, 2010. 46 people tragically lost their lives that day. Around 30 of their family members went to Jindo to stay with the families at Paekmokgang Harbor and Jindo Indoor Auditorium. The people there waiting for word on the missing have been there for more than 2 weeks now and don't have much physical or mental strength left. The family members of the Cheonan victims said they want to pay back the help they received from other volunteers 4 years ago. They added that they are being careful not to draw attention to themselves, that they just want to provide help in any way they can. That includes doing the laundry, cleaning up, and serving food, among other tasks. They have also expressed their sorrow and frustration about the Sewol-ho tragedy.
I would have never thought that so many young students would die. And at this moment, I'm just sad. Why do these tragic incidents keep occurring? I hope this kind of tragedy never happens again.
Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
U.S. researchers have been detecting increased activity at North Korea's nuclear test site, but say a nuclear test is not yet imminent if the regime follows its previous test practices. Satellite imagery posted on 38 North, the website run by the U.S. Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins University, shows vehicles and equipment outside a tunnel entrance at the Punggye-ri site. In the past, all equipment, vehicles, and personnel were withdrawn in the days before a test. However, the website admits it remains unclear whether North Korea will stick to the same procedures and timelines as it has in the past. It said the buildup may be different if Pyongyang is really preparing for a new form of nuclear test as it has threatened. Washington has designated 4 countries, Cuba, Iran, Syria, and Sudan, as state sponsors of terrorism, but has once again left North Korea off the list. The State Department's annual report on terrorism released on Wednesday did not include North Korea for the 7th straight year. The last time North Korea was listed was 2008. The report says the terrorism sponsor state designation is given to a country that has repeatedly provided support for acts of international terrorism. It went on to say Pyongyang is not known to have sponsored any terrorist acts since the bombing of a Korean air flight in 1987. The U.S. has, however, recertified the North as a country, quote, not cooperating fully with Washington's counterterrorism efforts.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is in the early stages of a European tour, but he's already managed to stir up tensions back here in Northeast Asia. Abe told a German daily that his country would not follow Germany's post-war track in dealing with its historical wrongdoings. Connie Kim reports.
Speaking to a German daily Wednesday before his trip to Frankfurt, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said his country would not follow Germany's post-war track. Answering a question posed by Frankfurter Allgemeiner Zeitung about whether Tokyo should benchmark Germany when dealing with its historical wrongs, Abe said the two situations are completely different. Since World War II, Germany has provided full compensation to neighboring countries and published textbooks that reveal the horrors that German leaders perpetrated. It's also apologized for its past wrongdoings. But Prime Minister Abe said that neighboring European unions had one common goal in mind, that being an integrated Europe. He said that is not the case for Asia. Abe added that Japan and its neighbors had already come to an agreement on compensation measures. The Prime Minister then turned his attention to the current tensions in Northeast Asia, blaming them on Japan's neighbors. He said the door to talks remains open, but that they should begin without preconditions. Abe's comments are once again raising eyebrows about Japan's sincerity to improve relations in the region. The Japanese leader criticized China for beefing up its military might, saying it would not serve to help Asia's economic development. He was responding to Chinese President Xi Jinping's remarks that criticized Abe's recent moves to the right. Prime Minister Abe left for a six-nation trip through Europe on Tuesday, where trade and security issues will dominate discussions. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, with a little over 1 month remaining before the June 4th local elections, the nation's political parties are busy finalizing their lists of men and women they want to put forward as candidates. While many races remain up in the air, some have already taken shape. Ji Myung-gil reports.
The ruling Saenuri Party and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy have begun pinning down their mayoral and provincial governor candidates in the race toward the June 4th local elections. A number of races crystallized on Wednesday. In Busan, the nation's second-largest city, the ruling Saenuri Party's candidate is Heo Byung-soo. He'll face off against Kim Young-chun of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy and independent Oh Go-don.
I, Heo Byung-soo, will work to solve the unemployment problem and open up a future that guarantees a bountiful life for the citizens of Busan.
In Korea's fifth-largest metropolis, Daejeon, Park Sung-ho of the Saenuri Party won 60% of the primary vote.
The primary vote is merely an event within the party. The ruling Saenuri Party must win in the upcoming local elections. We need your support.
In Chungcheongnam-do Province, ruling Saenuri Party's Chung Jin-seok will compete against the current provincial governor An Hee-jung of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy. Current Gangwon-do Province Governor Choi Moon-soon of the main opposition alliance will face off with the ruling party's Choi Heung-jip. The ruling party has finalized candidates for 14 of the 17 mayoral and provincial governor seats, while the main opposition has finalized 12 of its candidates. Candidates are chosen through a system that takes into account votes from party members, randomly chosen voters from the party, and the results of a phone survey. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Engineers
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea. Connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
Market researcher Strategy Analytics said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about...
The U.S. Federal Reserve on Wednesday continued to wind down its bond-buying stimulus program while maintaining its rosy outlook on the economy. It left its interest rate unchanged pinned near zero. Arirang News' Hwang Jie has the details.
There were no big surprises after a two-day meeting of the U.S. Federal Reserve Policymaking Committee on Wednesday. The Fed said that it will scale back its bond-buying stimulus measures by another $10 billion to $45 billion a month starting in May. That is on track with the Fed's earlier plan to end the program as early as October. The central bank pointed to a pickup in growth, saying the economic slowdown in the first quarter was due to the harsh winter weather. Earlier in the day, a separate report showed that the U.S. economy grew just 0.1% in the first 3 months of this year.
People are looking forward, and the Fed is also looking forward. Some of the more recent data on auto sales and the today's Chicago Purchasing Managers survey suggests that we're getting some strength, we're getting some recovery from that really tough cold winter.
The Fed, however, did not provide any new insight into when it will start raising its near-zero interest rates, which have held steady since December 2008. The bank reiterated that it will keep the rate unchanged for a considerable amount of time after the bond purchases end. The Fed began cutting back its $85 billion monthly bond buying stimulus in December as it cautioned about potential bubbles in assets while labor markets improved. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
April was another solid month for Korean exports. The nation's trade balance has now been in the black for 27 straight months. The Trade Ministry said Thursday that outbound shipments in April came to $50.3 billion. That's up 9% on year. This also marks the second time the country's exports have surpassed $50 billion mark since October of last year. The nation's trade surplus stood at around $4.5 billion last month as imports came to $45.9 billion. That's up 5% from the same period last year. And Korea's consumer prices grew at the fastest pace in 8 months in April, easing concerns about deflation. The nation's consumer price index rose 1.5% from a year earlier, the fastest on-year rise since August of last year. The price of fresh food, like agricultural and fisheries products, dropped, but rising utility costs like electricity, water and gas, as well as home rental prices, attributed to the spike. The data comes amid worries the country might be entering a deflation phase as the consumer price growth has been stuck around 1% since last September.
The World Health Organization says growing antibiotic resistance is a major global threat and is calling for urgent action. A new report from the UN body warns unless steps are taken to reverse the trend, minor infections we are able to overcome today could end up killing us in the future. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Global health authorities are sounding alarm about the world's growing resistance to antibiotics, which they say could allow for a superbug to develop. A report by the UN's World Health Organization says the resistance is occurring right now and affects anyone, no matter their age or location in the world. The WHO's Assistant Director General for Health Security, Kiji Fukuda, said the world is entering into a post-antibiotic era, where minor infections and injuries that were easily treated for decades are killing again. The WHO report, which compiled data from 114 countries, said 2 key antibiotics in particular no longer work in more than half of people being treated in some countries. One of them, carbapenem, is used to treat people with life-threatening infections. The WHO is calling for urgent action to address the issue. Experts say drug resistance is driven by misuse and overuse of antibiotics, which has given bacteria a chance to build up immunity. To reverse the tide and stave off a global epidemic, experts say it will take political will and considerable investments in research and development. The WHO report also called for better hygiene, better access to clean water, and vaccinations to reduce the need for antibiotics. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through our international headlines. For that, we connect live to our Eunice Kim standing by at the news center.
Eunice, it seems Kiev is standing to lose more and more of its territory in Ukraine to separatists. Tell us more about that.
Right, Jinju. Pro-Russia separatists continue to seize more government offices in eastern Ukraine. This, as its acting president, Oleksandr Turchinov, admitted Wednesday that his security forces were, quote, helpless to contain the unrest. At dawn, heavily armed gunmen stormed buildings in Horlivka, including its police headquarters, and in the industrial city of Alchievesk, east of Luhansk, dozens of rebels overtook its city hall. This as Kiev lost the major eastern city of Luhansk one day before when separatists took the provincial government headquarters and the main prosecutor's office. Meanwhile, Ukraine will receive some much-needed funds from the International Monetary Fund as it approved a $17 billion loan package, also unlocking aid from other entities, including the World Bank and the EU. Iraqis have cast their ballots in their first parliamentary election since U.S. forces withdrew from Iraq 3 years ago. The historic election day, though, was not without resistance, as more than 50 attacks were carried out near polling stations or on people on their way to vote, killing 14. Some 22 people were registered to vote, and despite the heavy security, voters remained hopeful of democratic change. 9,000 candidates are vying for seats in the poll that's being seen as a referendum on Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. Iraq is experiencing its worst unrest since 2008, with 160 people killed in bombing attacks this past week alone. An explosion at a train station in China's tense northwestern region has killed 3 people and injured 79 others on Wednesday evening local time. It happened at the South Railway Station of Urumqi, the capital of the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Xinhua News Agency also reports that knife-wielding mob slashed people at the exit. The station reopened 2 hours later as Chinese President Xi Jinping, who was in the region, vowed decisive actions against the, quote, terrorists behind the attack. The area has been besieged by violence as Islamist separatists have been calling for an independent state called East Turkestan. Malaysian authorities are set to release a preliminary report on its probe on Flight 370 on this Thursday, a similar version of which was sent to the International Civil Aviation Organization last week. Meanwhile, 2 Bangladeshi ships have been scouring the Bay of Bengal after Australia-based company Georesonance had said it captured aluminum and other elements that make up a plane there via electromagnetic radiation several thousand kilometers away from the search site. Australian officials leading the search have downplayed the company's claim, saying the location is not consistent with satellite data. And finally, U.S. President Barack Obama is seeing his approval ratings drop to an all-time low to 41%. That beats his previous record of 42% back in November. The post-ABC News poll released earlier this week showed that more than half, 52% of Americans, disapproved of his performance. The discontent grew when the 1,000 polled were asked about the U.S. leader's handling of the Ukraine crisis and the implementation of Obamacare, his health care plan. His unpopularity is concerning to his fellow Democrats, who will go head-to-head against Republicans in the 2014 midterm elections later this year.
Let's get a weather update for Chindo and around the country. The weather conditions in Chindo should be similar to yesterday, with winds blowing in at 4 to 8 meters per second, and waves will be as high as half a meter. But the currents in the water should remain strong. But right now, the sun is dominating the skies across the nation, and it should be sunny throughout the day today. And with that sunshine, highs will rebound into the mid-20s in most regions, so we can expect to have early summer-like conditions this afternoon. With that, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The high in Seoul will rise to 23, Daegu will peak at 25, while Gwangju and Busan climb to 24 and 21 respectively. Well, let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like down on Jeju will reach 20, Daejeon peaks at 24, Dokdo should see a high of 17, while Gyeongbuk tops out at 16. Well, that's all I have for you today, but I'll be back with more updates tomorrow morning.
Thank you very much, Jion, and those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Mark and I'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Thank you for watching.